Welcome in the Kunstverein. I'm extremely pleased that Minia is here. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's actually also thank you again for this wonderful show. And it was really, really joyful and of course also an amazing experience to work with you in the last 2 weeks and also in the time before. Great you're here and thanks for the exhibition.
Thank you. Thank you. And I also again enjoy this moment to thank you, all the whole team, and Heinrich, Theresa, Elena, and Catherine, Mark. It was really very, very nice experience to work with you. And I'm very, very happy to have this opportunity to show that work again because I didn't think I would have that chance. So I'm extremely happy of us being here today.
Yeah, and I introduce maybe also Theresa. She has been also a very important force and very supportive in conceiving and installing this exhibition, also in regards to the text about the exhibition, which Theresa wrote. And and me, I'm Heinrich Dietz, working at the Kunstverein as a director, and maybe just one shot, because you already mentioned this show has already, it is the second time that it is shown, and the first time was in Grenoble, 1.5 years ago, and maybe I try to give just a very, in a nutshell, in 2 sentences, short description of the show. The introduction could be maybe a guiding question. First, this very general question, how to establish a connection to a land. And then the more specific question, how to establish or how to inhabit a land that is formed by persistent conditions of colonial depletion, exploitation, and destruction. The show here, or in general, Minia arranges materials, images, videos to form spatial narratives, which is, I think, a technique or operation which is also strongly present in this show. And these histories deal with stories that have often not been told or have been forgotten. And in this case, the starting point is Guadeloupe, where Minia is from, like your home. And these are histories that have been ascribed into the landscape of Guadeloupe, but also in the bodies of its inhabitants. And these stories tell of the ongoing ecological and political ramifications of the colonial history, of slavery, the plantation economy, and of the still present colonial rule of the French state. And where all these issues condense is in an environmental destruction caused by a pesticide called capone. So that was it was now more than a nutshell, but a very short overview. And I pass on to Theresa.
Yeah, I'd like to start with the first question, which concerns the exhibition title. And I mean, we've been talking quite a lot during the last 2 weeks, but I think this is really key for your, the whole approach of this exhibition. And after Henry was mentioning that it's about re-establishing, or at least establishing a kind of relationship to the nature, it kind of makes one wonder why the title is I Killed the Butterfly in My Ear. Because I think this title sounds kind of brutal, because it evokes a picture of, I don't know, for example, that I have my hands and I'm scratching or crushing a butterfly, a really delicate and really thin, fragile insect. And maybe you could tell a little bit about the background story and where this title is coming from and how it is related to the show that we are seeing here.
Yeah, so in 2018, I was part of the Berlin Biennial, and I did a piece that is called Toli Toli, which is an installation where I decided to talk about the actual relation with storytelling that we have in that territory in Guadeloupe, and the silence around the specificity, the political specificity that we are living today within. And so I was looking for a metaphor, something I could use to talk about storytelling, and I've been interested by weaving since many years. And so when I looked around what in Guadeloupe I could use as a support for my work, to talk about storytelling, to talk about how to put words on a situation that has been silenced, and also where words are losing their faculty to actually address the reality because they have been overcharged and manipulated since centuries. So what is the value of word, and what is the value of actually even telling the story? And so I came to that pattern, which is a pattern of fish traps that are almost, I really struggled a lot to learn how to make this pattern in bamboo, this weaving process that is, that fishermen were using until the last, I think, 15 years, and now those fish traps are made in other materials. And so I decided to learn the technique, and I did a whole investigation around also when do you have to cut the bamboo and why, and how do you cut the wood that is holding this bamboo weaving structure. And so it was also all those very specific teachings and learnings about the specificity of the territory of Guadeloupe, and that we don't have much opportunities to be in contact with those. So I decided to work with that pattern, and so slowly with the time it turned into that metaphor for storytelling in itself. So this is like for the pattern, but the Toli Toli is a caterpillar. It's like a chrysalid, more like a moving chrysalid. And I used one of the songs that is very also almost completely gone, forbidden, that children were singing to the Toli Toli when they would find it in the soil. And so it was this for this installation, the idea was really to use that song and transform it and making it a new little kind of, not an anthem, but something that you keep in mind, and that allows you to see differently where you are, basically, and your relation with where you are. And so it started with that project, and one of the sentences of the video, Toli Toli, is butterfly provoke blindness when they blow in your ear. And so I decided to take the sentence as a starting point for the following big installation that I was having. And so for that installation, the idea is really to talk about, in a deeper way, the perception we have with our surrounding. And maybe we talk a bit more about the context, but very briefly to give you an idea about what does it mean to go in school in Guadeloupe. Is that, for example, in the program you have some parts of the program that are mentioning the Caribbean and the local territory, but those parts are really not enough. So you really find yourself with students that happen to me to give workshops to even 17, 16 years old students and ask them about the Caribbean and what is the name of the island south and the island north, and they cannot answer. So we are really in a situation where people have a strong disconnection with where they live. And so I wanted to address that again in my work with that installation. And so for me, the butterfly is this symbol of transformation, but the gesture of killing it is a moment. So the show is not about killing the butterfly. It's really about this idea of your perceptions are a space. You can activate that space, you can make it grow, you can change it. And so you also have a responsibility to cultivate, make your relation with what surrounds you different or more, to nurture that relation. And so, yes, so the idea was to have a title that is a shocking image, so to kill the butterfly, but again, it's not what I wanted to stay on. And it's also a moment of one of the videos that is important, so the butterfly basically is this element that when it blows in your ears, you lose the sight, you don't see. And so because you don't see, or because you are not using this habit that we have, but now we know we are in a society that is over soliciting really a lot the sight all the time. And so if you stop seeing voluntary, of course I'm not talking about blindness and incapacity, but more like this wish to relate differently and to have another type of listening about your surrounding. That was a long answer. Sorry.
Yeah, it answered a lot of questions actually. But I just have a really short question about this children's song, why it was forbidden.
It was not forbidden, it was forgotten.
Forgotten. I thought you said forbidden. So
sorry,
why
forgotten.
I was a little bit confused.
No, it was like a very common rural song in the 60s that my parents sang, for example, but I never ever heard it until my mom one day just told me, oh, have you ever heard? And I was like, no.
Okay.
So,
Okay, good.
sorry, forgotten.
Maybe I was mistaken, sorry. And talking about sharpening one's senses, I mean, you already kind of answered this question, but do you have a kind of image in your head or something you are imagining when a visitor comes to the exhibition? Because you already talked about the acoustic level, that you probably listening more carefully, and how we experienced it yesterday during the opening. Everyone is walking really carefully and kind of slow and making big steps, and it was really nice to observe that actually. So because you also use the term of choreography, and there is also a path in it, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about how do you see a visitor in the space. Of course you had the other show in Grenoble and also here, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that. Yes,
for each space it's a different elaboration. So in all the installations I'm making, I'm always having this interest on how can I create a specific type of attention. And so here it's, of course, with those drawings with the soil that are extremely visually present, that brings you back to this rooting with the floor, with the soil. But also then when you have to move through the space, you have an extremely careful movement. And also because the show is about ecological disaster and responsibility and present colonialism, not the past, but the present, which is also a question of responsibility when we know the situation. I like to provoke this situation where people have to care about where they are stepping, basically. So this is the case for this installation, but it's a kind of interest that I have since several years to understand the relation with the body, the relation with the senses, the relation with the attention, and the fact of thinking of the space like writing in the space. And then I really, when we were installing, we really did this a lot of how the gaze of the spectator gonna approach this space, what it sees first, And we took a lot of decisions like this. And for me, this is always my process of. I of course don't determine in a rigid way what's going to be seen and how it's going to be seen, but I definitely determine like a path for the gaze.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that the show is also about a present moment of colonialism. If one looks at the history of Guadeloupe, of course you have this, like one could say even, since the beginning of modern colonialism, starting with Christopher Columbus, and he was probably one of the first, or the first white person stepping on Guadeloupe, and starting from this, you have really a very, it's been a territory strongly shaped by colonialism. There was a genocide with the indigenous population, and then starting in the 17th century, it was under French rule, and this was also when the transatlantic slave trade started, and there were plantations on Guadeloupe or also on other islands in the Caribbean, and slaves were forced to work on these plantations. Then slavery was abolished finally in the middle of the 19th century, and in the 20th century, like 1946, Guadeloupe became an overseas department of France. So it's actually like a department of France, like Alsace here next to us, a department which is just 7,000 kilometers away from Paris. But this is the past, and I think this also strongly figures in your show, but there's also the present, and I already mentioned this ecological destruction which happened in the last 40 years or 60 years. And could you tell us more about this pesticide that has been used on the banana plantations and what was caused by this pesticide, looking at the ecosystem but also at the social system of the island and the connection to the land?
So I'll try to make this brief. First of all, we can just have a little timeline. So second abolition of slavery of Guadeloupe, 1948, the owners of enslaved people are going to have money back because they're losing properties. Those families with that money, they're going to build a lot of, they're basically going to own all the businesses until today. So this is a pyramidal structure that have not changed at all until nowadays. What happened is that means that they own all the supermarkets, all the big enterprises, and all the plantations of banana. The banana culture arrives after the sugarcane culture, and it starts really in the 50s. I should have checked my date, but I did not. So I think it's 50s, 60s that is really taking his big importance, like we know it now, of a monoculture made for exportation. The bananas are not consumed locally, or very, very little. And it really comes with this, the container transport system. So you have those containers that are bringing food to Guadeloupe. So Guadeloupe depends on external sources, external food coming, I think it's 80%. And then they didn't want them to go empty back to Europe, because also there is a dependency that is really built and constructed. So Guadeloupe for many years didn't have the right to have commercial relations freely with a lot of the islands around. So there is really a kind of bound, but also a kind of very rigid relationship built with Europe with those transactions. And so the containers, it was a loss of money to make them go back to Europe empty. And so that's kind of why the monoculture of banana happened. because it's a complete nonsense for the climate, because we are in a part of the planet that is touched by hurricanes. So every, let's say, at least 3-4 years, all the plantations are gone, and you have to receive those subventions of the European Union to be able to continue. And so it's a complete nonsense. The banana tree can resist when I think it's not more than 100 kilometers per hour, which is a baby hurricane. It's like nothing. So and also those plantations are, of course, taking space that could be used to produce food for the people. So in the local structure, the economy is completely false. Like it's an economy with injected money from the European Union and France, of course, and the system in terms of administration is that all the important head of hospital, police, justice, school, and of course the security, so the préfet, all those are chosen by basically the French state. So there is a political class that is like local politicians, like the mayors and the deputies, and so we have, of course, a political life that is local, but as soon as you go to the higher decision and the hierarchy goes a little bit up, it's not in our hand anymore until today. So we are definitely in a very colonial system until today. So yes, to give you a broad picture.
Mm-hmm. And connected to this persisting colonial structure is this scandal or really destruction of the land, which is the use of the pesticide capone, which has one of the chemical that is toxic in this compound is called chlordicon.
Mm-hmm. I can answer that one. Sorry, I forgot that part.
Maybe I pass on to you.
So in the US, during like early 70s, they were producing pesticide, and a huge accident happened in one of the factories, and all the workers were sick, so they decided to forbid that production. Then the French state, a French business that is actually a Guadeloupean or Martinican, probably family business, bought the authorization to produce this pesticide, and they're going to produce it in Europe and in Brazil. And then they're going to use it for officially until 93. In the Caribbean island of Martinique and Guadeloupe, it has been also used in other places in the world, but the specificity of Martinique and Guadeloupe is that the soil is really rich, it's super organic, it has a really higher level of organic elements in it, that makes that the active molecule of the pesticide that is called chlordicon got stuck in the soil. So now we have this contamination of the soil for centuries, at least 5 or 6 centuries. And what is very, what is the word? The situation is that the French state knew perfectly that it was toxic for the population and that they were contaminating the whole population, because it has been forbidden in the US even before they bought the right to produce it. So they knew, and what happened is the big families, so the descendants of colonizers that are really exclusively white, racist, isolated family. It's really a kind of, it's a very specific type of layer of the population. They are extremely powerful. They're extremely rich. Even in the French rate of richness, they're really huge companies. Mm-hmm. So they made basically lobbying to the French government, and they could have more authorization through the years to keep using those pesticides, even if they knew they were intoxicating the whole island. So that's the
Yeah.
situation. So now the rivers are polluted, the coasts are polluted, also it's in the soil, and it's stuck in the soil. So also our food is based on roots, and the roots are actually the food that is the most sensitive to this chlordicon. So it's pumping it. So it's been also a very challenging moment to understand how do we grow even the little food that we grow. Maybe we cannot even grow it anymore. So how do you relate to the place where you live in, when maybe that place is poisoning you, and what are the solutions? It's not, the chlordicon does not go in everything, so it does not go in some fruits and it does not go in some vegetables, and that's actually why it was used, because it does not go in the banana. So the bananas that were exported to Europe were not contaminated, no? So that's actually how they kind of dealt with the toxicity of the pesticide. And other pesticides are now used also in Guadeloupe and Martinique in also very suspicious ways, and it has not stopped. Even if we know this huge scandal of chlordicon now, the situation is still very, very preoccupating today. Yes.
Did France ever recognize this kind of scandal, and that they have that a mistake was taken? Because I mean, obviously it was already discussed in the 70s after this this accident in the USA.
Yeah.
So actually for a really, really long time, especially in the time when it was legally to use it, it was legal to use it from the side of France. Did they ever recognize it? For example, I mean, this was also, I think, very late in 2001. France recognized the slave trade from the 16th century. How's the situation, or the political situation right now? Because you already said it's kind of silent about this whole scandal thing.
Yes. So in Martinique, it's not that silent. People are really active about it. In Guadeloupe, a bit less, and. But still, you have some manifestations, especially workers, like the plantation workers that are dying in horrible conditions, because what are the consequences of that molecule is that it attacks the body. And so, especially the workers that used it directly without any protection, without gloves, their organs stop functioning. So they are really dying in horrible conditions, and they are still today this is still not recognized, for example, as a professional disease for them. And so the state has been recognized guilty of this a year and a half ago, maybe, yeah. But still, the persons that took the decision to continue to use were attacked, and now we are under this very strong situation because I don't know the name for the word for that in English. When there is a crime that is committed and you go and you denunciate it, so you put this in the end of the justice, no? So and in between, so this was done more than 15 years ago, and so now there is what is called in French prescription. So I have no idea. So prescription, which means that too much time has passed in between the moment the demand was made and now. And so it's like this crazy situation of having the justice against the abused, very obviously, workers. And so now this is the actual fight to be honest. Now it's like, how do we undo the situation, even if there is this prescription, like the time has passed. But of course, they made everything for nothing to happen during those 15 years. And now it's like, 15 years, when all the pieces are always there, and it's like, so this is the situation. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just, it's quite hard to like to say anything about that because yeah, it's really,
It's a strong situation.
definitely, yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
we go back a little bit into the space
Yes.
where we are actually sitting. And I mean, you already talked a lot about the soil and how the chlordicon is like kind of trapped in the soil. And I think, I don't know if like all of us already went to the exhibition. I think you too. Okay, but maybe
haven't.
afterwards. But you can see also from this perspective that, that we find and that we see a lot of like different materials. And this is probably a kind of banal question, and I really don't want to ask why you are using material, but whether how your practice, your artistic practice evolved during the time, and how, because you already talked a little bit about it, how you grew up, and that like doing something with your hands and like being in touch with material and also have this like tactile haptic experience is really an important aspect. And maybe afterwards we can like talk a little bit about the different particular materials.
So my process of working is a really slow process. I start a lot of things and I let them be, and I kind of forget them, and then I retake them. It's really, so I don't work with a straight idea that I'm gonna make or produce and that's it, not at all. So I have those simultaneous dialogues with the material that I'm using, and I'm spending time observing a lot where I live. So I live in a part of Guadeloupe that is also very specific, that is close to the active volcano La Soufrière. And so it's a very wet part, extremely rainy, not that hot. And so the relation with nature is that nature is also this aggressive energy that can eat everything because of humidity, but also because things grows constantly. So I really grew up with this relation with space, of having to have this dialogue with what surrounds you, having to determine what are the limits. And so all the elements of my work are actually elements part of my daily life. And I come from a family on both sides. They were farmers, and then they did all the jobs, but the relation with the land and with gardening and with producing your own food is still very strong, and which is not at all the case of everybody in Guadeloupe. So this has to be precise. Like, it's really something, that I think it's quite specific to either very humble family or families that has kept this practice. So around me, I have people that are always searching about medicinal plants and new techniques to dry whatever. It's really like a lot of experiment, a lot of joy in experimenting everything. And so I really grew up with parents that are very manual, so that they keep inventing new things to try. And so for me, the making with the body has always been present. And I think also that's explains for me my relation with the space in itself. Yes, so the materials are very often related with organicity, growing. I transform them sometimes, but I also have a relation of respect and listening and observing with the materials. So it's not only something I use, it's also something I dialogue with in a direct way. So.
And what we can explore while wandering around in the space is that we find the materials and the pieces like in different physical states. And also in the videos, and also like with the sound. And for example, the banana plant or the banana leaves that have been shredded, you glue them together, and actually these are the elements, right, with the wax?
Yes,
the white
exactly.
wax. Yeah. And there is, the wax, and we have the soil and like other materials. And I'm really interested, we can also talk about the other materials, but I'm especially interested about burning the wooden pieces. Because I think like this burning, not motive, but this burning situation is also, can be found in the wicker baskets, and especially here in these little pieces. And I think I wrote in my text that this also stands for, or I don't know, reminds one on like defenselessness and like the fragility, because I think burning something is really like to destroy something, or at least to try to destroy. And I think this is something we didn't talk about yet, so maybe this is a good thing to ask.
The fire. So for me, the fire is transformation and destruction, of course. It's also this kind of moment of rebellion and limit, like in history. Often fire marks something that is a limit that is crossed by people to say no to something. And so I used it in different parts of the show. So for the wicker basket, I decided to destroy them with the fire partly, and now we don't have the sound of the conch shells, but I used the recordings of a group called Watabui, which is a Martinican group, part of le Laboratoire d'Archivage de l'Oralité. So they did this incredible search in Martinique, really rescuing codes that were used with the conch shells to communicate different aspects of daily life or emergencies. And so I decided to use the sounds of fire, so to warn that there is a fire, of rebellion, and of death. And so those three are usually in the space playing. And so for me, it's also like the sound occupies the space and is walking, like activates the air. And also in the video, Parole c'est vent, so words are wind. The idea, the main idea, is really to talk, to consider the wind as an active force. And so to do that, I really use different aspects of the wind, the smoke, the hurricanes, the fact of blowing in the air. And so those figures are activated in different ways and dialoguing within, with each other within the videos. And so that's how the fire kind of entered into the show, and why is it present like that. And so the burnt wood of the hanging sculpture is also the same. Bois brûlé, so wooden burnt wood. Bois brûlé in Creole is also a common lyrics of Eugène Monat, which is one of the singers that I also took a quote from in the video. And it refers both to the skin, to the darkness of the skin, but also of consuming people, consuming the enslaved, consuming. So Bois brûlé in itself is like a very strong figure. And it's not for this image that I decided to burn the wood, but also after that I realized that this was also present.
Maybe one question again, coming back to the title, this other sensibility that maybe is activated once your eyes are closed, or once this dominant sense is silenced. And I have the impression, also your use of material is somehow, you're also even the title of the video, like Parole c'est vent, words are wind, but actually, what would it mean to really listen to the wind? And you just mentioned, you look at the different movements or different aspects of the wind. And this is something I think is very much present in a lot of the different levels of the show or materials, works, that the senses are, that you try to address a different kind of sensitivity maybe. And my question would be, also very long, because we also have this, what you talked about before, this terrible situation in Guadeloupe, connected to this pesticide and of course the long colonial heritage of this situation. And I just wanted to ask you, could one consider, because we will have this event by Beate Till, who is translating Edouard Glissant's works into German, and the title of this event is Martinique as a Landscape of the World, which is, I'm definitely sure, is a quote by Edouard Glissant. And could one also, looking at your show, think of it as Guadeloupe as a landscape of the world? Like, is this maybe also a model, the question how to inhabit a land that is destroyed by colonialism? I'm sure this doesn't only relate to Guadeloupe. And now coming back to the senses, maybe activating your senses could be like an answer how to inhabit the world, or another kind of perception, sensibility instead of perception could maybe be an answer, one answer to this, how to inhabit a land. That was not a question, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I can comment your comment. So I think that the answer is really yes, like to consider that senses are a space that you can really make bigger, richer, and that is your own space also. It's really something for me that is important to consider, is that those senses are your responsibility, of course, but also something that is extremely personal, also depending on a collective awareness. But you have that responsibility, no? So you decide how you relate with the river, and how you relate with the wind, and how you relate with the active volcano, for example, for me, in my case. And I think the relation with colonialism in Guadeloupe is a very specific one. No, not so many territories in the world are under control and under the rules of another system and territory nowadays in such a direct way, but many territories are under other types of controls. So I think colonialism is everywhere, and I really think that the process of decolonizing, to talk about something that we are acting, like where we have an active place and space, I think it's really to understand that you cannot nowadays be a citizen anywhere, I think, and not having a part of decolonized process to make, whatever is your background and wherever you live. So I think to talk about colonialism and to address the issues of colonialism is really, for me, like a topic that should be everywhere, because nowadays it's impossible to be disconnected from colonialism wherever you are. Either it's the sugar you put in your coffee, or the tobacco you're smoking, or the fact of having nice vacations somewhere. You know, it's like, it's really the way we consume our reality in the world is strongly connected with colonialism. So when I speak about Guadeloupe and the banana, how the banana plantation needs turn into contaminating. So Guadeloupe and Martinique are now, it's 90% of the population that is contaminated, and they have the highest rate of cancer of prostate of the world. So to give you an idea of, like, it's the situation is serious. And so this is a direct consequence, like of also the system we live in. It's you cannot have the privilege without having the other part. So to talk about this and to address those questions for me here is extremely relevant because of that too.
Yeah, maybe one last question which you already part of answered. And maybe it's two questions. Like one would be, because now many art institutions are also really taking up this term of decolonization and use this term in their program, and of course also try to really thoroughly work on this process. But it's sometimes often, and I definitely don't want to exclude Kunstverein Freiburg from this. I'm not sure if this is just a form of representation and not really doing the politics, or sometimes, I mean, that would be the worst if contemporary art would like substitute the politics. If colonized or a situation strongly shaped by colonialism is then consumed, which would be just another form of colonialism. And yeah, I wonder what could be where could like contemporary art practices, or not, it doesn't need to be contemporary, just where could be things people do, strange things that people do, or help in this process of decolonialization. And this is like one of the basic questions which I struggle with all the time while working here is this tension between art as something that doesn't need to have a purpose, that is somehow maybe even playful, that is trusting in material. And on the other hand, the knowledge that, of course, this idea of art as something autonomous is strongly, strongly shaped by a European conception, which is, again, strongly related to a certain class outlook on the world, which is, again, you can connect it to Enlightenment and also to colonialism. Mike, and do you, what would be your idea how to navigate in this territory?
So I think the reality is there is a trend. So we cannot say that there is no trend, there is a trend. Now, what do we do? It's a real need to decolonize. And I mean, people are suffering from colonization nowadays. So for me, again, the idea is not to, it's the problem that I see, and I think it's starting to be addressed, is that very often colonialism is still projected as something that is far and that is not within the dominantly white populations. And so it's really questioned from a point of view that is like the outsider or the person that is coming from, when it's also a very internal and violent process that has been internalized by a lot of people and populations, and since centuries, and has a history of racism, of discrimination, etc. And that it's also, for me, extremely interesting to hear those voices. You know, like, how do you address colonialism when you think about it, thinking about Freiburg? How does this work, you know? And I'm sure there are really a lot of research to be made, no? But then, so for me, the tricky part is that we still address colonialism very often as something that is coming from far and that is coming from the past. And the situation for me in Guadeloupe is like, it's very obviously not the past. It's a very present and real situation. I know people that are sick, and you know, like it's real. And also, it's this, it is a trend. We recognize it as a trend, and we already know that part of what's going to be produced going to be superficial. But again, is this idea of I'm really interested by healing process. What is a healing process? What happens when somebody heals? What does it mean? What starts to move that was maybe not moving? Really like the basic questions on healing, but also thinking about collective thinking a lot. And I think one of the strongest take of capitalism on our lives is that we feel really lost if we are said that we have the capacity to create new ways of making things. Like we are super how do you say that in English? Conditioned, extremely conditioned. And so I had a very big interest in pedagogy, for example. What is learning? What does it mean to even learn? We can see how children are learning constantly in that it's not something that is actually needed at school or a teacher that is in that posture of teaching. So there are all those very basic rules of life that we are kind of not questioning, and that we actually giving a part of freedom or autonomy to question and to realize and to make to a system. And this is not an obligation. And I think there art has a lot to do, because even if we know that art is part of a system that is part of accidental, white, patriarchal, heteronormal society, we still have all the other possibilities. It's still there. So it's also how do we focus on that? For me, it's this thing of I still have my little power, and so how do I don't give up this to the rest? Because I do think that there is a danger in the trend. There is a danger, because sometimes I also listen to talks and I'm like, oh my God, this is extremely bad. Like we're missing the real question. And also it's hard for academy to accept that there is a work to be done that is basically shaking all the basic statement on Occidental thinking. So this will take time, but I think it's happening slowly. Yeah.
Thank you. I would say, from my side, we could open it up.
Yeah, I think this was a pretty good statement to open up this stuff.